don't even have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock. I don't even have to watch a clock.
Hello. Welcome to the Bold Moves podcast. I'm the host, Mandy Bryce, and this is episode number 129. Today I spoke with a fellow bravery expert, Emily Ann Peterson. Now, just to get you a little bit into Emily Ann's story, here is something for you to imagine. Imagine that you have spent your whole life playing cello. You're a singer and a songwriter, a musician, but most importantly, you're a cellist. Until one day your hand trembles and you're unable to continue playing cello. That is what began Emily Ann Peterson's journey into discovering the definition behind, science behind, and the methods behind a few different kinds of bravery. It was absolutely fascinating to chat with her, as you will see if you listen to this podcast. Now, she's still a musician, and you can hear her songs. You can also get some bravery worksheets and some fantastic things in a bravery bundle, and it will let you know when you can get a free copy of the book Bare Naked Bravery. So stay tuned to the end so I can tell you exactly how you can do that. But without further ado, here is Emily Ann Peterson. All right, hello everyone, welcome. I am with Emily Ann Peterson, who is our latest guest. She is finally able to do our interview because she lost power living on an island in Washington, which sounds really interesting. Welcome to the show, Emily Ann.
Thank you for having me. Oh my gosh, it's been a crazy day.
I believe it. I'm so glad that it was able to work out. I know you already kind of explained to me your situation with where you live, but I'm going to make you hopefully not do too much repeating, but I'd like to hear the story on the show.
No, I'm happy to talk about it. I moved to Orcas Island, Washington in August. So this is my first winter experiencing island life in the Northwest. And one of the side effects, or just one of the parts of living on the island, is that occasionally the power goes out because the windstorm blows through and knocks a tree over and everyone's power goes out. So that's what happened today, and it's a big community island experience. Everyone drives down to the little tiny town that is the one town in the island and kind of hangs out with each other and talks about how our power and light company is called Orcas Power and Light Company, okay. But then we all laugh about how it's called Occasional Power and Light Company. So it's one of the fun parts about living on an island, which I'm really enjoying these days. So
very cool. So where did you move from, and what brought you specifically to Orcas Island?
Oh my gosh, crazy stories. I've always been kind of nomadic.
Okay.
I've lived in a lot of different places. Since I was little, lived in a lot of places. But I in January of last year, I decided to cut my geographic anchors, I should say, from the Seattle, Tacoma area, and started doing I converted all of my income to online based and location free income, and decided to take the freedom and go spend some time with my grandfather in Atlanta, Georgia. Okay. And so I was with him and family out there because I had spent the 10 years in the Northwest, so I didn't get a lot of time with that southern side of the family. So I spent some time out there, and then I got an invitation from a previous, a connection that I have out here on the island, and they asked me if I wanted to move into their guest house. So wow. Here I am. Yeah.
How fun.
Yeah. But I'm a singer-songwriter, so I travel around and I, do all sorts of crazy, fun things that usually require me to leave my home.
Oh, okay. So home is just kind of temporary anyway. You're not there that often.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how long I'll be here on the island. I love it out here. I'm definitely not married to it. And I'm happy to take adventures whenever they arise. So yeah.
Well, very cool. So speaking of adventures, you know that the podcast is called Bold Moves, and
Yep.
sounds like you've made a few. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your story and some of the adventures you've had and bold moves you've made so far?
Sure. So one of the, well, I'll say that, my book that is coming out in January of 2018, my book got started because I encountered this moment in 2013 where I got a diagnosis of a tremor in my right hand. And at that time, I was a full-time cellist and music teacher and recording instrumentalist in the Seattle recording scene and music scene. Loved it. That was a calling, a definite calling. I enjoyed every second of every part of it.
Sure.
And, but I got this diagnosis of a neurological, degenerative, hereditary tremor in my hand. And as a cellist, you can't have unstable hands. You have to have, like, my entire livelihood depended on the stability of my hands. And one day I heard this tremor through my instrument and called my doctor, and the doctor held my hand up to the neurologist's office because the tremor looks like the start of Parkinson's. It's the same kind of tremor. And so she was really worried because she didn't know, she's not a neurologist. She didn't know whether it was Parkinson's or something else. And so he diagnosed it as this tremor, which runs in my family. Like, I remember my great-grandfather pointing at the pears in the pear tree and having his hand shake while at the same time. So it occurred to me during that diagnosis, like, oh wow, I've seen this tremor. I've seen it in my grandmother's head as she shakes, and my dad's hand shakes a little bit. And so, but I was 27 at the time, and normally you get diagnosed with these tremors much later in life, like 50, 60 plus, So I was very young to have it. And I'm also was in a category that this affected my job and my day-to-day lifestyle a lot. So it was tragic news. I didn't know what to do. There was this moment of realizing, well, we might be able to kind of lessen this tremor, but there's no promise that it's going to get super bad tomorrow or, prevent me completely from playing, or whether it's just going to get worse very slowly over time. And so it's this massive question mark in my life. And it didn't make sense. Like, I'm somebody who appreciates stability and rules and like things being in boxes and order. Exactly. And so living with that such a big question mark did not seem like a safe or a wise decision. And so I decided to shift gears, but I didn't know where to shift gears or how to shift gears.
Right.
So, so I spent, I had previously been awarded an artist residency to go spend 6 weeks in the mountains of Washington recording new music for the cello. And I got out there in the mountains and was like, I told the organization that was hosting me, hey, this stuff just happened, and I really, like, the last thing I want to do is play my cello because it hurt. Like, it was emotionally painful to pick up that instrument because it was just a reminder that your future is completely unsteady and unpredictable and you can't depend on it. And that was too much for me. And I also was going through this massive grieving process because I had played this instrument for 20 plus years, and what would I do now? Who was I now? It was my identity, like my friends, my chosen family in the Washington area, my income, all of this was revolving around this instrument that I was not really allowed to play anymore because I had this tremor.
So with the tremor and your playing, how often did you feel the tremor or have it happen? Like, I understand that it was probably pretty random and you couldn't predict when it would
No,
happen.
I mean, I could predict it.
Oh, okay.
And I can predict it. And so it happens when when I'm holding my hand out into space. So
Okay.
when I'm holding my hand close to my body, it doesn't happen because my stability muscles are really solid,
Okay.
closer to your body. But my stability muscles were weak as my hand got further and further away from my core, which that's what happens when you're using the cello bow.
Okay.
As you extend your hand out to play a string, your hand goes out.
Okay.
And in order to create really beautiful, solid, wonderful, the kind of sound that everyone loves about the cello,
Mm-hmm.
you have to have really relaxed and stable muscles.
Are you able to do physical therapy or anything, or have you done
because it's all neurological, you can't just get stronger.
But then what do the stability muscles, how does that factor in with whether or not it's close or far?
So because it's neurological, it happens within certain moments and certain hand gestures.
Okay.
So like, for instance, my hand is relatively stable when I'm holding it palm down to the ground close to my body. But if I flip my hand over, you can see my hand shake a lot more.
Yeah.
And that just has to do with the neurology. Like, there are synapses that are misfiring in my brain that are causing that tremor to occur.
Okay.
And because it's degenerative, as it gets worse, that lack of control of my hand will spread to other movements.
Okay.
And possibly other body parts too.
Okay. So beyond just being there and being basically too sad to revisit this part of your life that's kind of coming to a close, you physically couldn't create the sounds you were used to doing anymore. Exactly,
which was heartbreaking because I was good at the instrument.
Right.
And I was watching. It's like watching somebody. I'm sure it's a similar kind of grief as somebody who is encountering like early Alzheimer's, or someone who is losing something they once had, but slowly over time. It would, like, the grief would really slap me in the face, because it would be moments like I'd like be passing a pen to someone because the pen is light. And if I'm holding a lighter object, my hand shakes more because the weight of that object is not engaging the stability muscles as much.
Okay.
So I'd pass a pen to a friend and accidentally throw it across the room, because it was this weird, bizarre, like, neurological retraining of my brain that, my hand is not reliable as it once was. So if I'm going to pass a pen to somebody, I have to really hold on tight to it. Rather than the just quick, here you go, picking it up really lightly and passing it to somebody was not something that I could do anymore. And that, like, those split decisions to do these normal tasks that you do every day was like, they just didn't work anymore.
Right.
Or I'd be like working on something, and because I wasn't focused on my hand motions and my hand movements, I'd actually accidentally knock over a mug of coffee or something. And that's not usually something that would make you like melt down in tears. But it's
what's happening behind it that hurts.
Exactly. Yeah. It was the, like, look at, you just knocked over a coffee, or, you just threw a pen across the room. Here it is. This is the stuff that you're not going to be able to do anymore. And I even had, I've been in contact with one of the leading researchers for surgeries for this essential tremor, because they have this really cool surgery that's basically like docking the space station in your brain with an electrical node that's attached to a battery pack that then goes into your and one of the leading researchers was giving a lecture and a brunch for potential recipients of this groundbreaking surgery. And he invited me to play some music for this brunch. And while I was there,
after your diagnosis?
This is after my diagnosis, yeah. And this is also after I came back from this artist residency, where in the artist residency, what happened was they gave me permission to not play the cello, basically, and instead just write any kind of music. So I came out of the mountains with not cello music, which was new for me. I hadn't written like other kinds of songs and compositions. And I came out of the mountains with pop songs, like singer-songwriter kind of stuff.
Okay.
And what was really healing for me in that process was realizing that I was not just a cellist.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually a musician. And more than that, I was an artist who had something to say. And that acknowledgement that I had something to say terrified me, because now I would have to say it.
I have to say it. Sure. Okay.
And I was like, how do you even convey, how do you be brave? Like, how do you actually be brave and courageous? And because I'm this analytical, like linear thinker, I was like, I want the 5-part, I want the steps. I want the ingredients to, what do I do?
Check things off here.
Exactly.
Here. Yeah.
I looked around everywhere and I couldn't find anything like that. So I just got really curious about it, and which is how this book got started and how my own podcast got started and a whole bunch of other things. So,
okay.
But back to the doctor's office, because I actually do want to say this story. So I'm here in this medical brunch, right? And everyone in the audience of this brunch, they're sitting around these round, it's a brunch buffet. So sitting around these tables, listening to this doctor give lectures on like kind of mind-numbing levels of neurology and research and all of this stuff. And I'm just scanning the audience, and I'm realizing that this waiter is walking around with these glasses filled with straws and placing them in the middle of the tables. I was like, what is happening? Why are they doing that? And then everyone around the tables who have tremors are grabbing these straws. And then it hit me that, oh my gosh, these people, they are not able to drink out of their own glasses without spilling on themselves unless they have a straw.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of these people are holding their glasses with both hands, or leaving the glass on the table and leaning forward to take a sip out of a straw. And before the buffet, or the brunch, I had spoken with one of the audience members who told me that she used to play violin in the Seattle Symphony, and she doesn't have it anymore. And then she apologized to me ahead of time and said, hey, I'm sorry if I walk out during your performance. Sometimes it's just really hard for me to see musicians get playing.
Yeah.
And it didn't quite hit me at that moment. And then when I saw what happened with the straws, and I saw people asking about, they were asking questions like, will this surgery allow me to have control of both of my hands or just one of my hands? Mm-hmm. And when you have to make that choice of like, do I want to have control of one or both of my hands? There was something that just cracked me wide open. Mm-hmm. And I started, this performance by like basically willing myself to not cry, because it was so emotional for me to witness all of these people who were many, 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 many years down the line with this thing that I have. And that was just heart-wrenching. Heart-wrenching.
I can't even imagine.
No, I couldn't either. That's
right. So what since then? I know you mentioned you write pop songs now.
Yeah, so I do,
and you have a book coming out.
Yeah, I do. So I am a singer-songwriter, and I perform around the country. I do house concerts, and I play, I teach songwriting workshops, and a lot of other really fun things that involve my songwriting skills. I also do creative consulting because I do have a background in business and entrepreneurship. I do creative consulting for small businesses who generally are having trouble trying to feel brave in some form or fashion. So either their marketing needs some tweaking or their business model needs tweaking because their business model that they started with doesn't actually align with who they are. And then that affects how they put themselves out in the world because they're not quite sure of themselves, or they don't really want to put their full self out into the world.
Would that be the pivot you made to become more online versus anything that you physically had to be?
Totally. Yeah.
Independent?
Well, I mean, what happened, this happens a lot in businesses. You start to realize that your business model is actually not empowering you to grow. That it's kind of a snake eating its own tail situation that and in Seattle, what was happening with me was, all of the money that I was making from being in the area was being spent on staying
living
in the area.
Yeah.
And then I realized, well, if I cut myself free from both those clients and also those expenses, that actually frees me to grow. Because I'm not spending that time on exerting that money in those ways anymore.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But I mean, that happens a lot in a lot of businesses. You kind of take a step back and go, wait a minute. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. So it sounds like you're doing a lot of fun and creative things.
Oh, it's true. What happened with the podcast was that this book writing process basically took me to this research area, right? I was getting curious, having a bunch of conversations with people that I admired about, they did really crazy, wonderful, amazing things, and talking to them to try to figure out, well, what is the commonality here? What does everyone have in common? And how are they able to be this brave? And were they brave to begin with, or was it a gradual thing? And those conversations were so good that I couldn't not have a podcast, because it just seemed like it wasn't fair to have these amazing conversations and then boil them down to just a tiny quote in a book,
Sure.
So yeah, I kind of got sidetracked by the wonderful podcast world, and at the same time was just learning so much. And I realized that there are actually ingredients of bravery. And there are forms and methods that it shows up in the world that actually contribute to its kind of elusiveness, but are really great. I mean, one of the examples is that there are 3 forms of bravery. There's internal bravery, where we are the only ones, the person being brave is the only one who knows that they are being brave. And that might show up in for instance, if you're going through depression and no one else knows it, and you decide to get out of bed, put on some pants and a shirt, and go to the grocery store. That's a brave thing for you to do that day. But the cashier doesn't think that it is, because that's, they see people in the grocery store all day long. And your friends who don't know that you're going through depression, they wouldn't know that that was a brave thing to do.
Right.
Then there's the second form is external bravery. And external bravery would be if a friend knew that you were going through depression and you texted them and said, I'm going to the grocery store. That external acknowledgement, exchange of, hey, I'm being brave, and you know that I'm being brave. That's external bravery. And then there's resonant bravery, where, say, for instance, the person going through depression doesn't think that going to the grocery store is a brave thing to do. They do it anyways. Somehow that gets word around, and someone else who's been through depression sees that person or hears that that person is going to the grocery store and thinks, wow, that's a brave thing to do. Yeah. And so that's resonant bravery, because you're acknowledging, oh, if I were in that person's shoes, that act would be a really brave thing to do.
Got it.
So that's kind of why bravery is this like elusive thing. We don't quite know how to define it, right? Because it shows up in a bunch of different kinds of ways. But in the moments like the man jumping into a burning building to save a child, both the man, the child, and the observers, the witnesses of that act all think that it's a brave thing to do. So it's an easy, like, oh, that's bravery.
Right.
That
makes sense.
It's an easy thing to identify. So, yeah.
So what do you think, and if you don't know this, it's totally okay, but what do you think your purpose is?
My purpose? So my purpose is to, I'm a light bringer in a lot of ways. I've experienced a lot of darkness in my life. I mean, aside from my tremor, there's been a lot of other things in my life that I've encountered that have been dark, and I'm not scared of dark places and scary places. And I know that there is light is so much brighter when you're in a dark place.
Sure. The contrast.
Yeah. And I think that our world needs more bravery and more of that lightness, which is part of the reason why I got so curious about the subject. And it's part of the reason why I see how important this is, like telling people and teaching people about what bravery is.
Sure.
Helps them be brave.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you can understand it, it's easier to experience it or create it for yourself.
Yeah. Or you encounter a moment, like even the three forms, you're a moment that makes you feel a little bit scared.
Yeah.
And if you can acknowledge why it makes you scared, that is often an empowering piece of knowledge, because then you can go, oh, this is scary because I might see my ex in the grocery store, and I don't want them to see me in that way.
Sure.
And so if you know that that's your reason why you're scared of going to the grocery store in the middle of depression, you can say, well, I can still be brave at a different grocery store where they probably won't show up at. And then it makes that feat of bravery easier to do.
Absolutely. I think since we sort of, yours bravery, mine boldness, they're not too different, but it's kind of come up a lot on this podcast that a lot of times our bodies haven't evolved as quickly as technology has. So we're still wired to be completely paralyzed by fear, thinking it's life or death, when in reality, the majority of us don't frequently have life or death situations. So a situation like, okay, I am going to look a mess because I'm depressed and I haven't taken the time to make myself look good. And on top of that, I'm getting out of the house, which is tough. And on top of that, I might run into my ex not looking my best, can feel like a literal, saber-toothed tigers after you to your body.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I think that's, again, if we can understand what bravery is and we can understand all layers of our constraints and our limitations, then we can use those constraints and limitations in our movement forward.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very similar to like, okay, so say if I'm blind or my vision is impaired, I'm actually using the wall to help me move forward. Mm-hmm. The wall, in some people's cases, the wall would be an obstacle. Mm-hmm. But for someone who has limitations, the wall can actually help you know which way to go.
Sure. The obstacle is the way.
Yep.
I love it. One question that I generally ask people is what the scariest thing they've ever done is, and you can choose to answer that if you'd like, but since we're on the bravery topic and you are now a bravery expert, I'm also curious, and it could be the same thing, but what is the most brave thing you've ever done?
Oh my gosh.
I'm surprised you have to think this.
Well, there's a lot of, but there's like so many types of bravery. So
sure.
Part of me is like, well, what kind of bravery do I want to talk about?
You could share a couple and impart what kind of bravery it was too, if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. So I have done a lot of online dating. That's a brave thing in and of itself.
Yeah, I have some friends that need to write books. Just on that. Some of the Tinder
Oh my
stories and
gosh.
stuff I've heard. I'm like, wow.
So insane. Well, I did have a good, like a success story. Like I met a guy and 2 months into our, budding relationship, he gets a dream job offer out of the country.
Wow.
And because, like, who am I to say, bring me with you?
Right.
We'd only known each other for 2 months. And so he was going to be in the country for another 2 months.
Okay.
And we made the choice to continue dating.
Yeah.
For the remainder of his time. And saying goodbye was so hard.
Sure.
So hard. I would say that was like, a definite, like a very finite season or choice that was a very brave thing to do, a choice to make. One that I don't think a lot of people would make, like, right. Oh, okay, you're leaving in 2 months. I get it. Let's.
Yeah.
No need for us to keep. Yeah, I mean, loosely, but it's still, like I am the kind of person that if I've been attached to somebody before and we aren't, or we can't, or that door is closed, it's hard for me to stay equally intimate.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, there's also, I also deal with stage fright as a performer, and that's a recurring feat of bravery that I go through. It's a common one too.
Yeah, that's come up so many times. I know public speaking, there are more people who that's their number one fear than people who fear death, which is crazy to me. But I mean, if that's true, I meant to ask too, what do you perform now? How do you do music, so to speak, now that you're not playing the cello? I know you said you sing. Yeah,
so I have, I write music on piano and also on, I actually play on my great grandpa's tenor guitar, and that's been my main instrument lately. So it looks like a guitar, but it just has 4 strings instead of 6 strings.
Okay, like a ukulele but bigger.
Yeah, it's actually the same tuning as a baritone ukulele.
Okay.
But it is bigger. It is the same size as a guitar, just missing 2 strings.
Got it.
Yeah. So I do a lot of performing on both piano and tenor guitar now.
Okay.
And I encounter, one of the drawbacks of having stage fright and this tremor is because it's a neurological thing. It gets worse with adrenaline.
Heightened stress, sure.
And so when I'm stressed out just in general, my tremors gets worse.
Yeah.
But when I'm on stage and I've got like the adrenaline of just, I'm on stage and I'm excited, my tremor shakes even worse. And if I'm in the wrong kind of headspace, performance headspace, then that can actually just be a downward spiral. And it's not, and my my poor performance is not just in my head. It's an actual, it's bad.
Got it.
And then it's awkward for the audience because they know what's happening because I'm talking about it and I'm telling my story about my tremor. And then it's just, it's like watching a train wreck.
So with both the stage fright making it so much harder, why do you still want to do that? And then second of all, how do you push through that on nights you're able to push through that?
Well, I do it because I know that I have something to say.
Sure.
And I know that people need to hear it.
Have you considered writing songs for other people to be your voice and then you can skip the hard time?
Totally. I'm totally open to that. And that's definitely something I'm keeping that door open. If somebody wants to cover my songs, go for it. Happy to have that happen. But there is something, to my house concerts, and my concerts are an educational experience as well as an entertaining experience.
Okay.
Because yes, And so I am talking about these subjects in the between my songs, and a lot of my songs are written out of moments of bravery that I've either experienced myself or have witnessed other people go through. So there's a lot of talking and a lot of it's kind of like this
Storytellers type.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And now that we've got the book we get to throw the book in the mix too. So there'll be some reading segments and all of that. So
awesome.
Yeah.
And
you asked about how I go through the stage fright stuff. There's an ebb and a flow. Some nights it's really bad. Like the other night, I was asked to write a song inspired by an author's book, and the author was present.
Wow.
In the performance.
No pressure.
And not just in the back of the room without any, in the dark back of the room. They were right in front of the stage with a light on them. So it was super nerve-wracking. And because I live out here on this island, I traveled a long way to make that performance happen. And it was not a full bouquet of songs. It was just perform this one song and then that's it. Okay. So those are factors that make the stage fright worse. It ups the ante and ups the pressure of the moment, kind of like a pressure cooker. And so because I'm experienced with the stage fright, I knew that was going to be more of an obstacle in the evening. So I was prepared, okay, don't drink caffeine for 72 hours before the performance.
72. It can affect you for that long?
Yeah, it affects me that long at least.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think it's because of my tremor too. I noticed I'm more sensitive to that. So yeah, I drink just green tea now for that reason, but don't drink the green tea. That has even a tiny, eat well, make sure you're well rested, make sure that you're not, stressing. I have to make sure that the social environment is not stressing me out anymore, than it has to. So it's kind of this delicate balance of connecting with yourself and going, how's the energy level? How are you doing? Are you breathing? Do you need some water? Are you hungry?
Sounds like a very holistic, multifaceted approach.
Yeah. And in general, for stage fright, it really helps to practice.
Yeah.
Because if you feel confident in the thing that you are executing, when all of the chaos is happening, you'll still be able to find your home base of, I've done this before. I know what I'm saying. I know how I'm saying it. I know how long it's going to take. It's almost like muscle memory. And so you just click into that moment, and the stage fright and all of the reasons why you would be scared of doing the thing you're about ready to do is less intimidating because you've done it so many times before.
That makes perfect sense. Now, I don't want you to give away the whole formula of your book, but would you say that those same tips to get through stage fright are also applicable to a lot of other situations where you would be trying to call upon your own bravery or, feel fear and kind of push past it? Or do you have other tips as well?
Yeah, I mean, the general thesis is that bravery is made up of three main parts: vulnerability, imagination, and improvisation. So we have to have the vulnerability to acknowledge honestly where the risk is in the situation. Mm-hmm. We also have to have the imagination to be we have to have defiant expectations that what we want to happen in the moment can actually happen in a good way. I like that. So, but that also acknowledges all of the constraints and the limitations that we encounter. And then the improvisation factor is leaning into that friction that we experience between what we desire and what the limitations are presenting to us, and using that friction as momentum and fuel to move forward.
Sort of like a blind person might use a wall.
Exactly. Yeah. And then executing those actions or desires based on a power of choice. that we have. So in any given moment, you have a power of choice, even if you are being victimized.
That's so easy to forget.
Yeah, and a lot of times our power of choice in a moment, like say for instance, you get an awful, terrible diagnosis and you have no control, or the power goes out in your island and you can't have a conversation that you want to have. You have a choice in how you respond to those limitations and those constraints, even if you are not in control of those factors.
That's great advice across, even when you're not just talking about fear or bravery, but that's just a great lesson to learn for everything.
And it happens, with the stage fright example, you're basically acknowledging all of the factors that go into the moment of glory or total destruction, fear that you're facing. What I eat, that's a power of choice. I can choose to eat terrible things that make me feel nervous, or prone to anxiety. I can choose to be late.
Right.
And add that on. I can choose to not practice enough and not be as confident in what I'm saying. I can choose to wear clothes that make me feel gross and not fun.
Yeah.
Those are all things that can empower the moment or take away from your confidence in the moment.
That makes sense. May as well line up as many wins as you can before you head out to battle.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned eating foods that make you feel nervous. Now, I've heard that before about caffeine, and I don't drink coffee. I'm generally a green or black tea person anyway, but I do notice sometimes, and it's not consistent, that if I have black tea or if I have pre-workout, that I do feel anxious. Sometimes I feel amazing and it's like the biggest mood lifter, and then sometimes I get really stressed out. I probably just need to experiment with myself to figure out.
Well, I noticed, so I didn't realize this about caffeine until I had gotten this diagnosis of my hand tremor, because cutting down caffeine was actually one of the first holistic ways to manage this symptom that I have. And weirdly enough, one of the things that happens for me, and I actually have asked a couple friends and they've confirmed it too, that when they drink too much caffeine, they actually have anxiety about money more often.
Interesting.
Isn't that bizarre? If I have a cup of coffee, then the next day I probably wake up worrying about money, even when I don't need to be. So put that in your hat and dance around with that.
Like that. I've never heard that.
Welcome to my world. And I've noticed that the green tea caffeine has a different effect on me. So you might test around with the types of
I'm going to start paying attention
caffeine.
to that. That's an interesting possibility. Thank you for that.
Totally. I mean, other foods would be
that's what
I know that dairy makes me more phlegmy. And so as a singer, as a singer, I also have to try to avoid eating a bunch of pizza 24 hours before a performance. But also if I'm hungry all day long, you're a little bit more prone to anxiety because your body is closer to fight or flight.
Right. That makes sense. So even if it's just a handful of nuts or something, smooth yourself over. That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a lot of experimentation in terms of.
I'm sure everyone's different. And like you said, bringing up the dairy specific to being a singer, there's probably different performance aspects. And I don't even mean just in front of people, but even if it's working in a factory, you might have other things to consider specific to whatever you need to do.
Or, I mean, so if you have, let's say you are facing something, a brave relational moment, and you know that drinking alcohol makes you angry or makes you want to fall asleep or like alcohol is a big factor in how you behave differently, right? Now, if you're trying to avoid fighting with your wife or husband and you are an angry drunk, then trying to have a brave conversation with them after you've had a beer is not a wise idea.
Sure.
Right?
That makes sense.
So those are also some other moments to consider, that like bravery happens relationally as well. And if you are facing a brave moment or a brave season, like you're going through a divorce and shit has just totally hit the fan.
Yeah.
There are other ways that you can care for yourself and empower your bravery during that season by like getting a full night of rest.
Right. Self-care in many forms. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you've given so much incredible advice so far. I'm going to ask for a little bit more. Couple questions. First one is, anything that you haven't covered so far that has been a good lesson for you, or that you wish you would have learned earlier, or that has been impactful that you would like to share to our listeners or viewers? Any sort of life advice? Let's hear what you got. And it can be, something small, like a little life hack, or something profound. I trust your judgment.
I love time blocking. I have a couple things. I love time blocking. I wish that I had gotten better at time blocking before. That helps me a lot with productivity. So the way that looks for me is, if I'm facing a big project, or like this book, for instance, putting this book out, rather than write a big long list of things that need to be done, I, next to each task, itemize like how long that task is probably going to take.
Yeah.
And then I schedule it in my calendar.
Okay.
Which, what that does is it gives my brain enough space to relax, knowing that I have a system that I can follow through. I don't have to worry about that thing getting done because it's in my calendar and it's going to get done on Monday.
Got it. So it's not like floating around reminding you at random times when you're trying to focus on something else, because it's scheduled.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Sounded
like you had a couple.
That's like a obvious, like a tangible task thing,
sure.
A productivity hack. But the other piece of advice is just that we are whole humans, and we bring a full 360-degree wealth of experiences and skill sets to our jobs and the tasks at hand. And so a lot of people go, oh, I'm just a software developer. I'm a software developer. And that's all they do. And they're just focused on that.
Sure.
But by acknowledging your potential for 360-degree development, you can go, oh, I'm a software developer who has experience in physics and loves to play the bass for a heavy metal band.
Sure.
And that actually makes you a better employee or makes you a better freelancer, because you are all of a sudden totally different. You're a different software developer.
That's
You're not
cool.
You don't just blend into the world, into the rest of the, monotony of software developers. You are a bassist in a heavy metal band, who nerds out on physics. That's totally rad. And there are companies who would hire you specifically for those two extracurricular things.
Yeah, that's cool. And I've never heard the term 360-degree development, but I really like it.
Oh, good.
Fantastic. So I said I was going to have two advice questions. The other one, aside from obviously your book, which we've already talked about a bit, do you have any other book recommendations you can share with the listeners and viewers?
Yeah. So when my book is out in January, you'll be able to download the book bonuses available on my website. And in the book bonuses are a list of recommended resources.
Okay.
On that list is a bunch of books, and a couple of them are, I swear by going through this book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Okay.
Even if you are not an artist or don't think that you want to be an artist, you should go through it. And it's like a 12-week process, and
Okay.
I've led a book club through the book several times and gone through it by myself or with a friend several times. And I have never gone through it and not had a life-changing pivot.
Wow.
It's amazing. I love it.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah, it's great. But I also really love, I really have gotten a lot out of Daniel Laporte's book called The Desire Map. I feel like that has a lot of really good things to offer.
I'm in the middle of that one right now, actually.
Oh,
I
good.
loved the fire starter sessions. So
Yeah.
now I'm on this one.
I would say dive headfirst into the Desire Map. Like, make sure you go through the whole workbook, because there's, similar to the Artist's Way, like you're not going to get all of the benefits unless you actually do.
Right. That's what I did with fire starter sessions, and I loved that too. So
yeah.
the plan.
The other
theory part first. So.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah. Oh, it's good. It's good. The other book that I have gotten a lot out of lately has been Greg McKeown's Essentialism.
Okay.
And it's basically how to be an essentialist about life, how to be more focused on the important things rather than distracted by all of the things that we can tend to be overwhelmed by.
Absolutely. I think all of us could probably use some reminders on how to focus a little bit with all the distractions that we have coming against us.
Totally.
So in case somebody is looking for a distraction and wants to either follow you on social media, listen to your podcast, maybe hear your music, where are you online so that people can find you and check out all of the wide variety of things that you have to offer?
The best place to go is emilyannpeterson.com.
Okay.
And there's a free bravery bundle that you can download, which has a coloring book and some worksheets and bravery worksheets and a couple songs available too in that bundle. And that's the best place to go in general. But that gift is there for you guys. And I'm also on Instagram and all those other places too.
Okay. I'll make sure all the links to those are in the show notes. But if would you just search your name to find you on Instagram and...
Yeah, I think my handle, I know my handle is Emily Ann Pete.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So if anyone's looking for you, that's where they can find you. That's perfect.
Yeah, and the podcast is, my book's title is Bare Naked Bravery, How to Be Creatively Courageous, and the podcast is the same title too. So
that makes it easier.
Yeah.
Excellent. I'll have to check yours out since you're on mine.
Please, it would be so much fun. We have one of the things that I've been I shouldn't be blown away by because of what I know about bravery and people who are brave, but the people who are in my podcast listener base are amazing and so brave. And we started a Facebook group, like there's a Bare Naked Bravery community now. And very shortly there's going to be, we're turning it into an online publication as well. So our community is so involved and excited about being brave for each other. And it's something that I'm just honored to facilitate. It's a really, really fun thing to get to see a bunch of other creatives doing really brave things and cheering each other on is wonderful.
I'll have to see if I can get the link to that in the show notes as well.
Sure.
But I'm curious, how did you get in touch with your listeners?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is, we started with the reviews in iTunes, so I could kind of see like, oh wow, people are resonating with what we're putting out here.
Yeah.
And then I'm just generally an open person. So anytime somebody, signs up for my newsletter or something, usually try to reach out or have some sort of connection that way. And it just started becoming more and more obvious that, wow, these people should know each other. I just had that inkling. And so we started, the Facebook group is just the free social media version of starting a big community.
Right.
And yeah, it worked great. Sometimes we do bravery challenges together, which are fun. But generally, I just really love hearing what my community is up to. Like, they're really rad. I'm so proud of them, and also impressed and admire them so much. So yeah, we'll do like an Ask Emily Ann live stream as well, so people can submit questions to answer either on the podcast or in the group. So
very cool. Awesome. All right, so my final question for you is, if Emily Ann could look in at 8 years old, could look in a crystal ball and see where you are now, everything you've done between then and now, and then of course, for example, your book's coming out in January, so the foreseeable future, on a scale of 1 to 11, how excited would little Emily Ann be to see your journey?
I actually think that 8-year-old version of me would kind of be a little bit terrified, just because it's a lot of things. Sure. And I am a survivor of an eating disorder too. And so that's a big chapter in my life that 8-year-old would not understand, or kind of be able to understand why it was so scary, or so I think there would be a lot of things that like my 8-year-old version of myself would go like, I don't understand. How is that happening? But generally, I think that they would be really encouraged and excited, like, wow, look at the cool things that are happening.
So from 1 to 11, what would you, if you had to put a number on it, how excited?
Oh, good question. Let's do an 7, but wanting to be a 9.
Okay. And one thing that I did mean to ask a little bit earlier was how you got that title, Bare Naked Bravery. Where did that come from?
Oh, I do. Well, I mean, part of it is that in order to be truly brave, there's that element of vulnerability, right?
Stripping away, sure.
Yeah. That if you aren't being vulnerable or feeling exposed in some way, then it's probably not brave. It's probably just you being an asshole.
All right.
Well, I mean, so let's say if I take my example for this is if I take my shirt off and run down the road in front of my neighbors' houses, they're going to go, oh my gosh, that's a really crazy, rude thing to do out in public.
Yeah.
Because I'm not being brave. I'm not being, maybe that's not a vulnerable thing for me to do. Just go do that because I'm not being aware of my context and surroundings. But if I do that and I'm still aware of how vulnerable that makes me, then that might be a brave thing to do.
Got it.
Right. So yeah, that's where that came from.
Very cool. I love it.
But also the thesaurus helps too.
The honesty. It's perfect. Well, thank you so much for all that you do. I'm really excited to check out your book once it comes out and look at all that bravery bundle you were talking about. Sounds incredible. So
please do it.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you.
I thought that she had so much insight and so much to offer. What a fascinating person. I really appreciate all that Emily Ann had to say. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, we spoke about how you could hear her music and try the different worksheets. We spoke about the Bravery Bundle in our chat as well, and that is available at emilyannpeterson.com, and it is Peterson with an O-N, by the way, in case you know some E.N. Petersons. This is an O-N. So if you head over to that site, you can download the Bravery Bundle, and then that will also put you on the list to be informed when the book is out in January. So make sure you're doing that. And there will be a few days during which that ebook is free. So if you're a fan of ebooks, head on over to emilyannpeterson.com so that you can put your name on the list, get your Bravery Bundle, and be ready for that book to launch. Now, Of course, if you would like to have an easier route and are already used to going to my show notes, you can check that out at www.mandiem.com/episode 129, because as I'm sure you were able to figure out, this is episode 129. So that is where you can find all of the links to the cool Facebook group we were talking about, and Emily Ann's social media, and again, the website where you can get that bravery bundle. I would love it if you haven't already, if you would subscribe to this podcast. That way, when Emily Ann has her challenge for us this Friday, you'll get an automatic download or at least a notification so that you know it is ready for you. I love having everyone do the challenges, so please do it. We were talking about hearing back from listeners, and I would love to hear from more of you. So if you're listening to this, find me on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. If you search Mandy Bryce, and that's B like basketball, RICE, you will be able to find me, and it's MANDIE. Of course, my social media is also on my website, so you could go to the show notes and then go to my social media from there. But I would absolutely love to hear from you. I would also love it if you shared this episode for anyone who could use a little bare naked bravery themselves. Again, it is my mission to inspire people to go outside of their comfort zones and get closer to their dreams. And so sharing these podcasts is one way that I can reach more people and hopefully inspire more people. So thank you in advance for sharing it. I, of course, would also love some reviews on iTunes so that iTunes helps me share it. And as always, I would love to hear from you if you'd like to be a guest. So mandiem.com/guest is where you can go to apply to be a guest. All right, I will end this now with excitement for Friday's challenge. I can't wait to share it with you. And as always, be bold and have a sparkly day. Bye-bye.